This is a topic of my research that I started, I think 2010 or 11, when I was trying to understand what impact investing meant. Um, so my trick usually about learning about a subject is to commit to teaching it. So I went to my dean and I said, I'd like to teach it. So he said, okay, you're on. So then I had to learn it. So it took a while. And in 2017, we published a paper in a finance journal with two of my PhD students. So my talk today is based on that research. But if you are the math type, if you like equations, you can go and read that paper. But today, I plan not to use any mathematics, okay? I'll just give you the basic insights that we discovered. Okay, so how do I forward these slides? Okay, it's over here. So, look, you're all here because CSR is a big word now, as is impact investing, right? Everybody is talking about it, okay? But I want to understand this a little bit more deep. Just because it's fashionable doesn't mean that it works, right? So I need to understand how it works, okay? So this is the fashionable thing, 21st century. My kids talk about it. They are millennials. And Gen Z talks about it all the time. I'm sure many of you have children who are talking about it as well. And when you ask them, hey, what do you think? And they will use words like, oh, we need to be sustainable, businesses need to be conscious, socially conscious, and investment should have an impact. So let me ask you, look, I'm a professor, okay? So don't think you're just going to sit here and just listen to me. I'm going to ask you questions, right? Okay. My question to you is the following. This thing you hear about, that this is about people, planet, and what's the third P? Profits. How can we get all three together? Looks like a good thing, isn't it? So some people would say, you know, when you actually do good, you're also going to make more profits. So there's a famous radio host in the US called Garrison Keillor. Some of you may have heard of him. He wrote a book called Lake Wobegon Days. Lake Wobegon was this mythical place, and he writes there where all women are strong, all men are beautiful, and all children are above average. That's what this people, planet, profit looks like. There is good in everything. My point is, if that's the world we live in, if we are really in Lake Wobegon, we don't need this conference, do we? If by doing well, I'm also going to make more profits, and it will also be more sustainable, then we can all go home, right? It's already happening. Yes, sir?
Since you said professor, you are a professor, so I need to reply back to the question you said.
Yeah.
I would personally, bordering disagreement. So people and planet, the two P's do resonate with me, but on the profits, I would start having doubts.
Okay, so you are saying forget profits, only people and planet. Okay, my question is, can I put all three things together or not?
I would love to do that, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to be like that.
Okay, exactly. So that's right. So that's my point. My point is, how can we do it? So my first thing is going to be, there has to be a trade-off. If there's no trade-off, you can just, I'll stop right here, you can all go home. Right? If there's no trade-off, if it's good for people, planet, and profits, we don't need a conference. Bhomik can just go and do something else, right? The very fact we are here means that there must be a trade-off. Now, I do not want to say that there are no businesses where this is true. Surely there are. But they don't need any cajoling from me. Thank you. Because they're earning good enough financial return and they're good for, fine, that's okay. But that's not enough. That's not enough. Such businesses where all three things combined well is a tiny part of what we can do. So the question is, what about the case in which there is a trade-off between profits and impact? at the margin. How can we combine that? That's what we need to focus on. Because if there's nothing, I don't need to, okay? So I'm going to look at a situation where investing in social impact may not generate as high a financial return that I can otherwise get in the market, right? So I have a choice. I'm an investor. I can invest in a firm that's giving me market return, or I can invest in a firm that gives me a little bit less. Now, how can I attract these people?
Can it generate shareholder value?
So value returns the same thing, right? Value is the present value of all the returns you're going to get.
No, not in the monetary terms, but otherwise shareholder value.
No, I'm talking only in monetary terms. I'm saying take the present value of all profits. To me, that is value, right? Let's stick with that. So, if there is a trade-off, how do I put it together? That's what I really want to talk about. Okay. So, couple of answers. Milton Friedman said, leave firms alone. It's not their job. Their job is to be respectful to the shareholders. Shareholders want profit. Let them do profit. If there is something that doesn't generate enough return, it has to come from somewhere else. What is that somewhere else? Two possibilities. Philanthropy. Good. Because philanthropy is exactly that. It says, I'll give you the money and I don't expect a return. Or I expect a return that's not as high, it's okay for me, right? And there are people like that. I'm not going to deny that, right? Philanthropy is. But I'm going to make an argument that philanthropic money is limited. Because if it were not limited, again, we won't be having this conference. There's enough philanthropic money to go around. So one is philanthropy, but I'm going to argue it's limited. What's the second source? Come on, guys. What is the second way of doing social things that private investors will not do? Government, right? Okay. And I'm not a big fan of government, right? We can leave it to the government, but my view is, as a first order of things, the government is going to mess it up. Okay. Not completely, but they're going to lose 80 cents to a dollar, right? They will do 20 cents of good, 80 cents will just disappear. Okay? So I have a very strong view that we cannot leave everything to the government. Private sector has to. What private sector can do is, they're going to worry about every cent. Government is not going to worry about every cent. Okay? But even if you will give it to the government, there's still an issue of where would the government raise this money from? They'll have to raise it from us. So they'll have to increase taxes on us. And guess what we think every time Nirmala Sitharaman says, I'm going to raise your taxes? हम गालियां देते हैं कि क्या आपका टैक्स क्यों बढ़ा रही हैं, आप कम कीजिए, right? So there is a tension. That's what I'm saying. There is a tension. Even if I want to rely on the government still has to raise taxes, and tax raising is not efficient either. We have this, any IRS officers here? We have this whole machinery of IRS which is not very efficient in collecting taxes. What percent of India pays taxes? Shockingly low, shocking. Okay, so then if we can't raise it from the people, let's hit the corporates. You'll say, that's good. That's what corporate social responsibility is, isn't it? Corporates are willingly giving money. Are they willingly giving money? Many of you, are you willing? No, the government has to say 2%. What is it? It's nothing but a tax. So if I leave it to you, you won't pay the 2% tax. Maybe you'll pay 0.1. Maybe you'll do 0.2 just to get your name in the paper. But beyond that, again, you care about shareholders. So the question is, if there is a trade-off, what happened? Okay. How do I put it together? Okay? All right. So I'm going to say that we have two types of investors. Philanthropic investors, they are willing to take a smaller return. Commercial investors say, nothing doing, I have other things to do. I have opportunity cost. Give me the market return or else I'm not giving you the money. These shall not stay separate. That's my only point. Because one answer is, let philanthropy do all the social stuff, let commercial people do all the other stuff. I'm saying, no. Why don't we take a little bit of philanthropy money and combine it with commercial money? In the following sense, suppose I have a business where the opportunity cost is 10%, market is demanding 10, but this business is only going to generate 8. Then all I need is just a 2% bump to the commercial. I don't need to take all of it. So somehow if philanthropic money can come and say, don't worry, your return is 8% otherwise, but we will take the remaining part, then I've combined it. That's where we want to go. It's not going to be simple, but that's basically what the answer is. That let philanthropic money come in and bump up the return for commercial investors. And you're going to say, ये क्या बकवास है? अलग-अलग रखो ना. मिला के क्यों रखते हैं? The reason मिला के इसलिए रखते हैं because philanthropic money is limited. So if I have 100 rupees of philanthropic money, I don't want to put all in the social impact. If I can only put 10 or 20 just to bring the other 80 up to 100, I can do 5 investments, right? You see what I did? I just combined it in such a way that 20 plus 80, 20 plus 80 got everybody up. So that's what the goal is, how we can expand it. Okay? So the goal is to marry philanthropic money with commercial money. But this marriage is worse than intercaste marriage. It's not going to be easy, okay? We have to convince a lot of people this. And that's what my paper is about, how to actually do it. Okay. So far only talk about investors. Next is, पैसे तो आ गए, लेकिन चलाएगा कौन कंपनी को? चलाएगा कौन? सोशल कॉज है तो उन लोगों को बुलाइए जिनको सोशल कॉज में विश्वास है. वेरी गुड, राइट? सोशल कॉज क्या है? एजुकेशन है. दैट मीन्स गेट ऑल द पीपल, ऑल द यंग पीपल हु आर पैशनेट अबाउट एजुकेशन. फाइन, बट आई एम लिमिटिंग माई सेल्फ. Why should I only look at people who are passionate about education? Maybe the best person, a best CEO who can run their businesses doesn't care about education. वो बोल रहा है मुझे तो नौकरी मिल रही है बार्कलेज में 5 मिलियन की, मुझे 5 मिलियन दो तब आऊँगा. But he is damn good, she's damn good. We need to attract those people too. So the second part of this scheme is that managers need to be incentivized. So this whole idea that, we should only have non-profits, and non-profit CEOs are only going to make 1/10 of what? Not going to work, because you will only get people who are so passionate that they are willing to take 80% cut. मिल जाएंगे एक के दुक्के, पर we can't run a country like that. We need to get the best people to execute this as well. So what do I need to know? I need to make sure that managers have the right incentive. अब क्या है? ठीक है, चलो, managers आ गए. I got the best one and said, don't worry, we'll pay you what the market, your market wages are. And philanthropic money आ गई. उन्होंने बोल दिया हम 20 दे देंगे. Done, right? No, because once I get the money, once the manager is in, he'll say, छोड़ो यार, ये social impact छोड़ो. Right? I got the money in. Why should I pay attention to the fact that you want social return? Money पैसा तो आ गया. Shareholders बोल रहे हैं नहीं, profit बढ़ाओ, growth दिखाओ, market share बढ़ाओ. So I'll start paying attention to that, especially because you got me a CEO who thinks like that. So there is a commitment problem. There's a commitment problem that even if you hire the best guy, they're not necessarily going to work. So what do we need to do? We need to incentivize even those. We need to put conditions on them. And the conditions are going to be what the security design is going to be. In a simple way, security design तो ऐसे बोल दिया कि बड़े शब्द हैं. But basically the idea is, manager को बोलेंगे कि अगर हमको social impact नहीं दिखाना, तो तुम्हारे stock option 0 है. I'll make sure. So if I make it conditional on seeing impact, then the guy doesn't care about education. He cares about his money, but his money is not going to grow if he doesn't deliver. That's what we need to do. So we need to make these securities in such a way that his return is lower if he doesn't deliver on the social performance. And that's what the security design is going to do. Now, You don't want to go too far. You'll say कि अच्छा सिर्फ social impact पे कर देते हैं. That's not good either. Because सिर्फ social impact पे किया तो वो क्या करेगा? वो सारा पैसा social impact पे लगाएगा. Efficiency की मारो गोली, right? So we have to make sure this is a fine balance. This is a fine balance that you also need to be efficient as well as pay attention. And that's not a trivial problem. The reason it took me 6 years with 2 of my PhD students to write this paper was because it's not a simple problem. It's a complicated optimization problem. But I'll just give you what the intuition is. Feel free to stop me more, but make sure not the only guy who's stopping me. I mean, you can stop me, but I want others to stop me. हाँ? नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं, पर मैं और लोगों को भी encourage कर रहा हूँ. ठीक है? All right. Somebody is keeping time or not? अच्छा, तुमको बीच में उसको बताना पड़ेगा कितना time बाकी है.
So we'll show you when 10 minutes are left.
Okay, अभी कितने बाकी है?
A lot many, sir. Your session has 140.
Okay. So basically, yeah. So what we have to do is we have to design securities, and I'm going to throw some words at you so that you can go back and impress your friends and family. We have to design what's called contingent securities. Contingent क्या है? Based on some outcomes, right? Contingent on some outcomes. Securities have to be designed so that the cash flows are allocated contingent on a certain outcome. Outcome is such that they have to satisfy both type of investors. Philanthropist कहेगा मैंने पैसे दिए हैं, पर अगर वो नहीं हुआ तो मैं वापस ले लूँगा. Money back guarantee. That's what the security has to look like. I call that a social impact guarantee. What is a social impact guarantee? पैसे दिए और outcome है education का कि children के scores 100 से 110 होने चाहिए. नहीं हुए तो नहीं मिलेंगे. So the security will pay me back if the outcome is not met. Now the guy who's running the firm will say, नहीं यार करते हैं, क्योंकि वो नहीं किया तो मेरे पैसे कम हो जाएंगे, right? Basically that's really the idea. So you have to satisfy both type of investors and managers. So managers का भी जो है वो ऐसे होना पड़ेगा, right? So what we'll do is we'll make the managers pay off just good old equity. Good old equity. And what is equity? Equity is residual. जो और लोगों को नहीं गया, बाकी बचा वो तुम्हारा. ठीक है? तो अब मैंने एक सोशल इम्पैक्ट गारंटी लगा दी कि पहले तो सोशल इम्पैक्ट गारंटी वालों को पे करेंगे. क्यों पे करेंगे? अगर सोशल इम्पैक्ट नहीं हुआ तो थोड़े पैसे उनको चले जाएंगे, which means equity को कम हो जाएंगे. So my stock options are going to be worth less. Now the guy says I better make sure that outcome is met, right? That's basically the idea. So social impact guarantees are these type of securities. Social impact bonds you have heard, those are called pay for performance. This is, one is a guarantee, other is a payment. Now I'm going to tell you who should hold what for this to work. Okay. All right. I talked about this already, why we need to optimize. Okay. Philanthropic funds are limited, so we have to use it judiciously. So you can't say philanthropy is a sari company run karo. So in terms of cash flow allocation, this is what the idea is. Suppose I have a company that is achieving some social impact outcome, but it's also generating cash, right? That's what impact means, it generates goals. The insight I have is you should never sell that cash flow to philanthropic investors. आप समझिए मेरी बात. Philanthropic investor को भी मैं cash flow allocate कर सकता हूँ कि ये cash मिलेगा उसके बदले में ये दो. But that's a waste. Why? Because philanthropic money is limited. उनकी opportunity cost ज़्यादा है. तो cash flow है, to the extent possible, sell it to commercial investors. Because commercial investor is plentiful, right? So they are not, their opportunity cost, their shadow cost, हम economics में बोलते हैं, is lower, right? They just want a market return. Philanthropic owners don't want any return upfront, but उनकी opportunity cost बहुत ज़्यादा है. तो उसको limit कीजिए. So the idea is make sure smallest of the cash flows goes to philanthropic investors. तो आप कहोगे smallest है तो zero क्यों नहीं कर देते? पर zero कर दिया तो problem ये है, incentives चले गए. So what do we need to do? We need to say, philanthropic guys, you will get money only if I fail to do what you ask me to do. Which means sometimes the cash will end up going to them, which is inefficient. But it has the right incentive properties. So now you see what's going on. Now there's optimization going on, and that's what our papers does. It says, depending on what type of cash flow versus social impact you have, you will find the right balance. And उसके लिए थोड़ा सा जो है आपको mathematics करनी पड़ेगी. But the intuition is very simple. Try and allocate minimum cash flow to philanthropic investors. जितना cash आ रहा है वो commercial investors को बेचो, because उनको चाहिए ही 80 cents to $1, right? ये तो बहुत ही अच्छी बात है. कौन सी कंपनी आपको है जो 20% एफिशिएंसी दे सकती है? मैं कहता हूँ women को ही हायर करो. वो तो 80% ही चार्ज कर रहे हैं. And if they are just as good, you reduce your wage cost exactly by 20%. Why aren't companies doing that? बताइए आप. Why aren't companies doing it? अगर ऐसा है that women can do the same job for 80 cents to $1, why not replace all men with women? 20% cost. कौन सी McKinsey, कौन सी कंपनी आपको बताएगी कि मैं 20% काम कर दूंगा? So you heard who won the Nobel Prize this year? Claudia Golden. She looks at this question carefully and she says it's not as simple. It's not as simple. The reason women are getting 80 cents is because there are lots of reasons for that, right? We have to go to those underlying reasons to change it. You know, the parental, whatever is the parental expectations, kitni education leti hain, child birth ke baad, whether they want to come back or not, all those issues are important. Once you remove those, the discrepancy will go away. But it's not so simple कि हाँ उसको 80 cents में बुलाता है. There is a joke. Is Claudia Golden only going to get 80% of the prize money or not? The answer is no, because you know her work is just as good as any other man. So if your work is just as good, okay, it's a little digression. Okay, so we want to ensure that there's both financial and social returns. Okay, now the important part, why we are here. मैंने बोल तो दिया कि based on some conditions, contingencies we live, which means we have to design those metrics. कि social impact होगा तो आपको पैसे नहीं मिलेंगे, otherwise मिलेंगे, जो I talked about guarantee. In other words, these metrics are essential. So the goal of the CSR community is to work on that. How can we measure these outcomes? Cash flows is easy to measure because हमारे country में हजारों CA भरे हुए हैं, वो cash flow बिल्कुल करके बता देंगे. लेकिन ये जो social impact measurement है ना, that is not so easy. So that's what we have to work on. Once we get this designing of securities, वो मैं आपको करके बता दूंगा, right? Anybody who can read my paper can do it. So the ESGs and impact metrics need to have 2 or 3 things. Okay? First of all, they have to be measurable. You can't just say कि social good हुआ कि नहीं हुआ, right? Measure कैसे किया आपने? And those metrics have to be defined ahead of time, not after the fact. कल बहुत awards मिले लोगों को, you know, पर उनको किसी ने पहले नहीं बताया कि हम आपको measure कैसे करेंगे. हमने बोल दिया कि आप करो, बाद में अवार्ड दे तो हम जूरी को बिठा देंगे, जूरी बताएगी कि आपने. अरे भैया, जूरी को पहले लाओ, बोलो कि हम क्या देखेंगे, उसके हिसाब से then you will be incentivized. Otherwise जो मर्जी है करो और बाद में इनाम मिले तो मिले, ना मिले तो ना मिले. So impact metrics have to be measurable. They also have to be non-manipulable. This is a very important point. कि आपने metric की कि जितने बच्चे स्कूल जाएंगे उसके हिसाब से आपको पैसा मिलेगा. तो people are very clever. Basic greed तो जाएगी नहीं ना. तो जिनको उस पे पैसे मिल रहे हैं वो क्या करेंगे? They start cooking the books. बच्चे चाहे 10 गए हों वो दिखाएंगे यार ये इसके भी साइन कर दे, इसके भी साइन. If these metrics are manipulable, it defeats the purpose. It defeats the purpose. So these metrics have to be carefully thought of. These metrics have to be defined in advance. And these metrics cannot be uniform, company by company. जो कंपनी कह रही है कि मैं ये करूँगा या करूँगी, उनसे पूछो कि तुम क्या metrics हमको दिखाओगे, पहले बताओ, फिर हम तुमको पैसा देंगे. So हमारे इसमें क्या fashionable हो गया है कि there are a lot of people sitting around there, वो कहते हैं हम we know how to do ESG measurement. यार तुम कैसे ESG में, सबका ESG measurement वही थोड़ी होगा, सबका कार्बन फुटप्रिंट थोड़ी है, किसी का एजुकेशन है, किसी का कुछ है. सो यू हैव टू डू दिस केस बाय केस, एंड आवर प्रोफेशन इज नॉट डूइंग दैट. दे आर सेइंग हम कंपनी बनाएंगे, हम ESG मैट्रिक्स को वो कराएंगे. क्या करेंगे? आपने लिस्ट देखी है ESG की मैट्रिक्स की? वो ऐसा लगता है कि किसी यूनाइटेड नेशंस का आप वो पढ़ रहे हो, साला 50 पेज का वो, ये भी करो, जेंडर इक्विटी भी करो, ये भी करो. अरे यार सब कैसे होगा, राइट? एंड देयर इज अनदर प्रॉब्लम, जितनी बड़ी लिस्ट उतना बड़ा ही चांस फॉर मैनिपुलेशन. आपने बोला कि 100 चीजें हैं, 100 चीजें करनी है. क्या आप अपने लड़के के लिए लड़की ढूंढ रही हो, क्या सुंदर भी चाहिए, उसको कथक भी आना चाहिए? यार सब नहीं होगा, तुम बताओ तुमको क्या चाहिए, राइट? और बहुत कर दी तो लोग वही बताएंगे, देखिए कितनी अच्छी कचौड़ी बनाई है ना, उस पर ध्यान दो. सो द मोर metrics you have, more chance of manipulation there is. And when it comes to money and finance, designing, if the metrics are not designed properly, it's like having dynamite in one hand and a matchstick in other hand. It's going to blow, because number one thing humanity has is greed and self-preservation. आप देखो कंट्री में क्या हो रहा है. सेल्फ प्रिजर्वेशन इज द नंबर वन. आप कितना ही बोलो कि नहीं पीपल आर गुड, ये वो, नंबर वन मोटिव इज सेल्फ प्रिजर्वेशन. कई बार लोग बोलते हैं कि मैं जब आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस की कॉन्फ्रेंस में जाता हूँ, पीपल बोलते हैं यार ये AI जो है ना बड़ा बेकार है, दे विल टेक ओवर ह्यूमैनिटी और सारी ह्यूमैनिटी चली जाएगी. मैं कहता हूँ अच्छा ही है यार, ये ह्यूमैनिटी ने कौन से इतना बड़ा किया है? एक दूसरे पे बम डाल रहे हैं, एक दूसरे को मार रहे हैं, सालों से मार रहे हैं उसी ह्यूमैनिटी को. तो मे बी AI विल बी काइंडर. Why are we so afraid of AI? Maybe AI, if we program it well, will be kinder than it. So think about it. Just because it's AI doesn't mean it's bad. Maybe it's actually good. Because humanity has disappointed me greatly. Look what's happening with Israel and Palestine. I mean, look what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk about that, but you understand my point, that, yeah, manipulability will kill these things. So these securities have to be designed carefully so that it's based on things that can be measured but cannot be manipulated. लोग कहेंगे यार ये तो हमने बड़ी कंडीशन लगा दी, ये तो बहुत ही कम हो जाएंगी कंडीशंस. And I say, okay, I don't want the list of metrics to be long. I want it to be simple. Because if it is simple, I can make sure whether it's manipulable or not. So this is my last point. उसको जो है मैंने सारे capital letters में किया है. These metrics have to be simple. They cannot be complicated. The more complicated it is, more chance of manipulation. So make it simple. तो लोग बोलेंगे यार simple से कैसे होगा? My point is, simple metrics are going to be correlated with the ultimate thing you want. And that's all I want. I want a correlation. It doesn't have to be a perfect correlation. So ऐसी चीज करो जो measure करने में आसान हो और manipulable नहीं हो. This is very different from what the whole CSR world is doing. They are going towards complication. कि सब करेंगे, gender equity, ये वो फलाना डिंगरा 50 लगा देंगे. Even SDG goals, 17 SDG goals है यूनाइटेड ने कहा. पहले 5 थे. अरे यार वो पहले 5 तो करो, गरीबी तो हटाओ. नहीं हम वो भी करेंगे. 17 नंबर का आया कहाँ से? एरिस्टोटल ने कहा था कि 3 से ज्यादा लोगों को दिमाग में नहीं चलता है. You know that, ना? Aristotle said, work with 3. Any of you do presentations and if you say these are the 10 important points, फाड़ के फेंक दो. बोलो कि नहीं, give me 3. और फिर चाहिए तो 3 times 3 कर सकते हो एक में. But stay with 3. So that's my point about these have to be simple. कितना टाइम है भैया?
So 20 minutes.
हाँ, so I want to leave some time for questions. Okay, I'm almost done. So the future of impact investing is, first of all, the corporate structures that you see are going to be broader. You're not going to see only two types of securities, debt and equity. There are going to be things like securities that are contingent on some other things. वो हमने इतनी ज़्यादा नहीं देखी हैं. So first of all, structures will be different. And they won't be very simple like non-profit and profit. ये dichotomy मुझे बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं है कि ये impact है ये नहीं है. ये भी मुझको पसंद नहीं है. You were there in my talk yesterday. I talked about it that कि जो Steve Jobs कर रहा है, is that impactful or not? That is also impactful. Steve Jobs never gave money to any philanthropy, but that's okay, right? So this dichotomy should go. So you will see that corporate structure. So there is things like benefit corporation, B Corps. These are richer corporate structures that are emerging, which pay attention to the fact that impact can be measured. So that's what we are going to see. We are going to see social impact securities. You have heard of social impact bonds. I have introduced social impact guarantees. You're going to see more of these securities are going to come. And that is not unusual. We have had contingent securities before. For example, there are bonds like oil-linked bonds, right? There are securities based on exchange rates. Now there are securities based on monsoon, right? Monsoon come hua, to people will pay you. I mean, that's a great way of looking at things. I think we need to go more into that, but with a little bit of care, right? Making sure they are not manipulated. So, agar monsoon hai, to make sure it's measured by instruments that nobody can manipulate, right? Otherwise, this won't really work. Okay. As we do this, the advantage is going to be the participation will be broader. That's my goal. That's what I want to do. In other words, I don't want to limit. This room should be full of people who are greedy, not full of people like you who are not greedy, right? Because impact should be done by everybody, not by just the people who care about. So broader participation tabhi aayega when we put these things right, so that everyone is interested in it, right? So we'll see richer corporate structures. We will see even people who don't give a damn about education becoming CEOs of education companies or poverty reduction, if you will, as long as the incentives are right. That's what the future of impact investing looks like. But it has to be done carefully. Khatam ho gaya kya? Okay, I'm done. So I will stop here for you to ask any questions. Yes, sir.
Can the decentralized finance take over the centralized system?
Can the
Decentralized.
you can do it as long as when you're doing decentralization, at the level of decentralization, you have the right incentives, right? करना ही पड़ेगा, because if you do everything centralized, you know the problem with that is, हमारे डीन यहाँ पे हैं, उनको बहुत पता है ये चीज़, हर चीज़ centralized कर दी ना तो सब डीन के पास जाते हैं कि मेरी प्रॉब्लम वो अब उनको कितने ही अच्छे हों वो, their time is limited. Plus he doesn't know what's happening on the ground. So what does he have to do? He has to go and decentralize. तो उन्होंने मुझको बोल दिया कि भगवान तुम impact करो जो करना है, but I'm going to hold you responsible. I'm going to look at some metrics and say अगर तुमने इतने सारे startups को नहीं किया तो मैं तुमको निकाल दूंगा, right? But then he doesn't meddle. He doesn't come and say कि तुम ambassador में क्यों रहे, ताज में क्यों रहे. I will do whatever I want, right? So decentralization is the way because information is distributed. He doesn't have the information on the ground. I do. I don't have the information that Soumya does. Soumya कहाँ चला गया? Soumya does. So I have to decentralize and give it to him. But then you give power, but you also give responsibility. I'm going to check you. I'm going to check you on some broad, simple measures that can be measured simply. That's what the key is. Yeah. So I'm not for centralization. यार सेंट्रलाइज सारा कंट्री सेंट्रलाइज हो रहा है, कहाँ ले जा रहे हो हमको? हाँ हाँ और गवर्नमेंट तो 100 में से 80 तो खा जाती है, मतलब खा नहीं भी जाती तो कई बार वेस्ट कर देती है. मैं तो वेस्ट को भी खाना ही मानता हूँ, राइट? हमारे प्रधान जी बोलते हैं ना खाऊंगा ना खाने दूंगा, लेकिन जो वेस्ट होगा वो भी तो खाना ही है ना. तो हमको सब दोनों कम करना पड़ेगा, करप्शन एज वेल एज इनएफिशिएंसी. I'm not saying everyone should be greedy. I'm saying greed is a number one thing that we better admit.
In social sector, what happens when this word comes? People see you as a negative person. One. Second point you made is regarding the incentivize to the managers. When you talk about it in the corporate or in the boardroom, people say, why you give the money to your employees, give it to the society for which it is made. So these 2 points, how to that mindset change to be bring in
You have to educate. You have to educate. So I'll give you one other example.
Yeah.
This shows up in the debate about high corporate salaries. यूएस में लोग कहते हैं कि यार क्यों टिम कुक को आप क्यों दे रहे हो 300 मिलियन डॉलर्स, उसको अगर 1-2 मिलियन दोगे तो भी बेचारा काम करेगा, और करेगा क्या, राइट? क्यों दे रहे हैं उसको 300 मिलियन डॉलर? यू नो व्हाट हैपेंड व्हेन स्टीव जॉब्स डाइड एंड टिम कुक टेक ओवर, दे गेव हिम 100 मिलियन शेयर्स. अब यू कांट आर्ग्यू कि हाँ उसकी एफिशिएंसी बढ़ गई ओवरनाइट, इसलिए कल तक तो उसको सैलरी थी 1, आज हो गई है 350 करोड़. नहीं, रीजन यू आर डूइंग इट बिकॉज once he's sitting on those securities that are worth 350 crores, वो 2 बार सोचेगा before he wastes money.
Understood.
Right? So आपको लगेगा कि इतना क्यों दे रहे हो, but the damage he can do if he's not incentivized is far worse. अब मान लो उसको छोड़ दिया, सिक्योरिटीज नहीं दी, तो टिम कुक तो है ना, वो थोड़ा सोशल टाइप ही आदमी है, वो तो बोलेगा कि सारा ही दे दो, तो शेयर होल्डर का नतीजा. So the reason we are doing this, so that's what I mean. We'll have to explain to shareholders the reason we are paying these managers high salary is so that they don't do damage. They don't do the wrong thing. कई बार क्या होता है, लोगों को CSR का कर दिया ना तो उनकी पिक्चरें आ जाती हैं न्यूज़पेपर में, तो कई बार लोग पिक्चरों के लिए कहेंगे कि हाँ यार सब दे दो, और शेयर होल्डर मर गए बीच में, right? So you have to make sure that they spend their money judiciously. To do that, you have to pay them a high salary. High salary, not in terms of salary, but in terms of these contingent securities. That's what you have to do. So you have to convince people कि मैं salary high दे रहा हूँ, पर उसका जो फायदा हमको हो रहा है, the efficiency I'm bringing in is much higher.
But it is totally different than business world, than NGO sectors or the
बिल्कुल नहीं होना चाहिए. I think if I were up to me, I would remove these classifications. NGO तो छोड़ ही दो, बोलो ही मत NGO.
Right.
Everybody should do what's the right thing to do. Depending on what you're saying you will do, I will hold you responsible. So, जैसे Ronald Reagan ने बोला था ना, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. So we should tear down this wall between social and regular. I think there is no difference. I'm exaggerating, but you know that I like to exaggerate for like dramatic effect. Otherwise, आप सो जाओगे, आपको याद भी नहीं रहेगा.
So,
हाँ.
okay. Sorry, I'll make it quick. Just want to understand that in the Indian context, a lot of non-profits have traditionally been reliant on grant giving and so on. So, impact investing, blended finance, all these are things that are kind of have been brewing in the West, have sort of leapfrogged in India in some shape or form. But the one thing that is always sort of vague and ambiguous is that how do non-profits which have so far been reliant on non-grant giving, then tap into these things? Is there a bit of a blueprint maybe you can share? Yeah. Of course, it's not that simple.
No. So the people who are giving you grants, they have to get their act together. They have to say, I'm not just giving you money and saying do whatever you want. I will come and say, तुम commercially raise करो. आप बोलोगे नहीं कर सकता, क्यों? क्योंकि इतना रिटर्न नहीं है. मैं कहूँगा अच्छा ठीक है, मैं तुम्हारी risks जो है, I will bear it. So use the grant money only for risk bearing capacity to make commercial investors whole. Then it works. So rather than give pure grant, you basically give these kind of contingent thing. A lot of firms are doing that. So if you look at some of the philanthropic people, that's exactly what they do, right? They don't just give you money willy-nilly. They just say, okay, we want to see this. And that's what I'm proposing here. So pure grant, will only work if the firm doesn't produce any cash flow. If you're only producing social good, commercial investor aayega hi nahi. Then grant is right. Okay. There's one other advantage of grant. I'll say something. ये जो सिक्योरिटीज में बता रही हूँ उसमें काम बहुत लगेगा. मेजर करो ये वो. कभी कभी क्या होता है, ग्रांट इज द बेस्ट थिंग कि कौन बैठ के मेजर करे. सो फॉर वेरी सिंपल थिंग्स यू डोंट वांट टू मेक इट कंटिंजेंट. अब जैसे कोई गरीब छोटा बिजनेस आया किसी का, आपको लग रहा है कि वो अच्छा काम करेगा, तो ये मत कहो कि हाँ मैं तुमको दे रहा हूँ 1,000 रुपये लेकिन मैं रोज आके चेक करूँगा. इट्स नॉट एफिशिएंट. And that's what happens in microfinance. Microfinance is not efficient to collect it. So it's best to just give it away. Giving it away का फायदा ये होता है, incentives are properly aligned. एक बार आपका पैसा आ गया ना, तो आप यही करोगे कि मेरा ही पैसा है, right? So you won't waste it. So that is an advantage of grant that we have to figure in. So there are these two nuanced things about
Just
grants.
one small follow-up. I'm so sorry. Can you just share your opinion on the social stock exchange in regards to this?
किसने कहाँ बनाया सर? कहाँ देखा है आपने social
अभी
stock?
तक
कुछ नहीं हुआ है. कुछ नहीं हुआ है. सोशल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज बना हुआ है, वो कमेटी रहते हैं. दे हैव नो आइडिया व्हाट टू डू बिकॉज दे डोंट हैव मैट्रिक्स, दे डोंट नो व्हाट टू मेजर. वो सोशल स्टॉक बोल रहे हैं कि हाँ स्टॉक आ जाएगा लेकिन रिटर्न कुछ नहीं लेंगे. रिटर्न कुछ नहीं लेंगे तो फिर उसका प्राइसिंग कैसे होगा, कैसे होगा? बकवास है एकदम. हाँ
हेलो हेलो
किसके बारे में? आपने देखा है कि अभी तक कुछ नहीं आया है, कुछ नहीं आया है. Total stock exchange will have to look like a regular stock exchange in which some of these securities are traded. No, there is no country in the world which has a social stock exchange. Because for social stock exchange to work, ये मोहम्मद यूनुस ने बोला तो लोगों ने कहा सब हो जाएगा, लेकिन वो साला ट्रेड कैसे करेंगे? अब maybe somebody will come up, will say कि we'll start trading things like good likes and stuff like that. हमारी millennial generation का कुछ पता नहीं है, they can come up with something like that. But we are not there yet. We are not there yet. हाँ तो वो link, हाँ so link ultimately cash तो show me the money. You remember? जेरी मैग्वायर की वो मूवी याद है? उसने बोला show me the money. Okay. That's not going to go away. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. He has his hand up. Yeah. अच्छा आप पूछ लीजिए.
So I just wanted to understand, you had written simple in bold in terms of metrics, measurement, the impact. But if you look at practically, even conducting impact assessments, a lot of impacts are cross-linked. When we do a theory of change, it may not be that simple.
ये आपके सेक्टर की बहुत बड़ी गलती है. आप सोचते हैं, because your sector is obsessed about saying कि हर चीज fair होनी चाहिए. हर चीज fair होनी चाहिए. All women should be strong, all men should be beautiful, and all children should be above average. It's not going to happen. Because in that process of making fair things, you will lose simplicity. And when you lose simplicity, it will be unfair again. I'll give you another example. I'll give you an example of corporate restructuring, right? Bankruptcy law, right? Bankruptcy law is complicated as hell, right? थोड़ा सा simplification हुआ है with IBC, but not simple enough. उसमें क्या होता है? वो सारा पैसा lawyer ही खा जाते हैं, right? A judge, lawyer. My solution, I wrote an op-ed about it. You guys can Google it. My solution was कि bankruptcy जो हो जाए ना, तो जितने भी asset हैं किसी एक को allot कर दो. One person. That's it. That's my bankruptcy thing. Senior bond holder. यहाँ किसी का नाम ले लो कि हम सारे भगवान को दे देंगे, या हम मदन को दे देंगे. बोलोगे ये तो fair नहीं है यार. But fair इसलिए होगा कि I know in case of bankruptcy only I'll be given. So what will happen is when I'm bidding for those securities, I'll price it appropriately. You see what I'm saying? So if I know in bankruptcy I'm the one who's receiving it, price of my security will be high. Other people know in bankruptcy they'll get nothing. So the price of their security, that's how it is fair. But they should make it simple. But मेरे ideas इतने simple होते हैं ना कई बार, तो लोग कहते हैं नहीं यार ये इसमें मज़ा नहीं है. कई बार मेरी डीन से भी इनसे भी लड़ाई हो जाती है कि आप इतने सिंपल आइडिया ले जाते हो लेकिन उनको इम्प्लीमेंट कौन करेगा? मैंने कहा हिम्मत करिए, आपने showed up, and I'm just taking full advantage of it. So, if you haven't read the book Elon Musk, the biography, I recommend it highly. Okay, you'll never want to work for that guy, right? But the man is true genius. The man is true genius. उसके principles जो हैं are fantastic. So I'll give you one principle. It's not part of the talk. His principle is start deleting things. लोग बोलते हैं बहुत rules हैं. उनसे पूछो rule किसने बनाया? तो उन्हें legal ने बनाया. वो कहता है नहीं, ये legal में किसने बनाया? उस आदमी को यहाँ लाओ. और आदमी नहीं है तो eliminate the rule. If you can't find the person who made the rule, eliminate it. So his thing is eliminate all rules, and if you need it, you can put them back afterwards. And his rule is, if you are not putting back at least 10% of the rules, that means you have not eliminated enough. This man is a genius. He made 3 companies that were impossible. Nobody thought that he'll be able to pull it off. And he's not doing it based on subsidy. उसने कहा मैं मार्स जाऊंगा. लोगों ने कहा पागल है तू मार्स जाएगा. So he said, no, I'll make it profitable. So what did he do? He said, I'm going to create these rockets and send these satellites up, and I'm going to charge money for it. I'm going to create people and send people, charge them. So he made it profitable. That's how we made it. I think that's what we need to. I think ये माइक जा रहा है इसका. जनरली ऑस्कर में बहुत ज़्यादा बोलते हैं तो काट देता है ना. ऐसा तो नहीं हो रहा है. Music. I think we need to think like that. So social sector should always say, is there a way to make it sustainable? And if you can make it sustainable, you can scale it. If you don't make it sustainable, it will not scale.
So we are time.
We are done? ये इन्होंने बहुत देर से हाथ के नहीं यार अब extend करेंगे तो फिर गड़बड़ हो जाएगी.
In your simple matrices, are you just stopping at correlation or are you going towards causation also?
For measurement, I don't need causation. I don't need, because all I need to know is if high education outcome can be measured by simple thing like how many lunches were served to students, that's a good enough matrix. I'm not saying lunches are the cause of education. I'm not saying. But if it measures properly, कि बहुत बच्चों ने lunch खाया तो उसका मतलब आए होंगे, and therefore that's good enough for me. For the purposes of this, I don't need causation. Causation is a very difficult thing to do, right? But for me, correlation would be good enough. इनका last question. इसके बाद जो भी question पूछेगा उसके पैसे लगेंगे.
In the coming era of CBDC and digital money, where do you feel the money supply and CSR projects and impact of those changes?
Totally unrelated. ना तुमने, there's nothing to do with this. लेकिन फिर भी आपने question पूछ लिया. अब ठीक है, मेरे को कल एक talk देनी है CBDC पे तो मैं answer देता हूँ. The idea that government can control money has been degrading, not just because of CBDC. It got degraded decades ago because the notion of money kept changing. पहले money क्या थी? जो आपके हाथ में पैसा है. फिर क्या है? आपके checking, demand deposit, that became money. Then credit cards came, that became money. उसके बाद Africa में people started using phone money as this thing. So the idea of what constitutes as money has always been degrading, right? So with CBDC, you will lose more of this control because more of the things will start making money. अब मेरे कई गुजराती friends हैं, उनको मैंने पूछा कि भैया demonetization से क्या फर्क पड़ा? बोलते demonetization हो गया? हमें तो पता ही नहीं है क्योंकि their notion of money is just their word, right? So money flows in many different forms. The government just needs to keep track of it and see. And they can control only some part of it. But the total control is not going to be there. So, simple answer, digital money is here to stay. That train has left the station. We just have to adapt to it. So, thank you very much. I'll stop right here.